In this module, I am going to discuss a very important topic, that is idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. It's defined as a specific form of chronic progressive fibrosing interstitial pneumonia of unknown origin occurring in adults and limited to the lung and is associated with histological and or radiological pattern of UIP, which is also called the usual interstitial pneumonia. Prevalence of this disease in a systemic review was found. It ranges from 0.5 to 27.9 per 1 lakh population, and the incidence range from 0.22 to 8.8 per 100,000 population. Most cases of IPF are sporadic, but familial cases have also been described. Familial pulmonary fibrosis accounts for less than 5% of the IPF. Inheritance appears to be autosomal dominant. Within the family, affected patients may have a different kind of interstitial lung disease and has no distinct distinguishing feature, and it requires a thorough family history. There are certain mutations which have been implicated with the familial pulmonary fibrosis, like the related with the surfactant proteins and mucin 5B. And the familial pulmonary fibrosis has been associated with increased incidence of bronchogenic carcinoma. What are the risk factors? While it doesn't have a known cause, but there are certain risk factors in which it is more prevalent. I think the most important is the cigarette smoking, most strongly associated with idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. Exposure to stone, metal, wood and organic dust has also been suggested as a risk factor. Microbial agents like the Epstein-Barr virus, Hep C, CMV, HHV7 and HHV8 is also implicated. There is another very important risk factor which has been emerging, is the gastroesophageal reflux, may contribute to lung injury via the microaspiration. And the genetic factor which leads to the familial pulmonary fibrosis I have already discussed. When do they present? Normally IPF or idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis presents late 6th or 7th decade. The majority of these patients will have a history of cigarette smoking. Patients commonly report a gradual onset of dyspnea on exertion and a non-productive cough over several months. Some patients may have a fever, fatigue, myalgia, arthralgia, and some patients even may have mild weight loss. Must ask for a history of family disease because it will help you to make a diagnosis. Must ask for the symptoms suggestive of a rheumatic disease. Ask for the current and recent medications. Ask for a history of exposure to fumes, dust, asbestos, silica, or any therapeutic irradiation. When you examine these, I think all of you know that bibacillar fine crackles are audible in these patients, but rarely they may be absent. Patient with more advanced disease because of the traction bronchiectasis, you can hear a squeak due to traction bronchiectasis. Finger clubbing can be seen in 45 to 75% of the patients. Always when you are examined, look for the sign of connective tissue disorders, because this will also help you to make a diagnosis in your patient. So how to evaluate any interstitial lung disease per se? You have to find out the identifiable cause of the interstitial lung disease, because you have to take a detailed history and some of the lab tests which can tell you what is the probably reason in that patient, because there are, like, if a person has a connective tissue disorders, you can easily find out that this person has interstitial lung disease because of connective tissue disorders. So, or a person has asbestosis. So exclusion of the identifiable cause comes by the history, physical examination and the few lab tests. Then the other important is the assessment of pattern and severity of the respiratory impairment. It is mandatory to get a complete lung function test in all patients of suspected ILD, and you should do the spirometry, the lung volumes and the diffusion. Then the most important investigation, radiological investigation, in addition to the chest diagram, is the HRCT, high resolution thin section CT of the chest, which will confirm the presence of ILD and characterization of the type of ILD, because it can, on one go you can say probably I am dealing with this kind of, and then you require multidisciplinary clinico radiological pathological correlation to make a diagnosis of any interstitial lung disease. Now talking about the idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. So the diagnosis require exclusion of known causes of ILD like drug toxicity, environmental exposures, connective tissue disease, then presence of the UIP, usual interstitial pneumonia pattern on high resolution computerized tomography in patient not subjected to surgical lung biopsy, or the third is the specific combination of HRCT and surgical lung biopsy in a patient who is subjected to lung biopsy. Most of the patients who have a characteristic HRCT pattern are never subjected to surgical lung biopsy. But when you have not that characteristic pattern, then you subject these patients to surgical lung biopsy depending on the feasibility of that procedure. And then combination of the CT and the surgical biopsy, you can make a diagnosis of the idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. As far as the investigations are concerned, you normally get the usual investigation in any case who has been having a long cough, the hemogram and the kidney functions and the liver function test, because if you have to do any investigation, you require all this. Then in addition, you must send serological studies in these patients for the identifying subclinical rheumatic diseases. So when IPF is suspected, you should get rheumatoid factor, anti-nuclear antibodies and anticyclic citrullinated peptide, anti-CCP. Rheumatoid factor is not that specific. So for rheumatoid arthritis, anti-CCP is a more specific test. And then anti-nuclear antibodies. Then other tests will depend what you are suspecting. Like if you are suspecting the anti-synthetase antibodies, if you are suspecting any others, if you are suspecting scleroderma, then only you get the anti-SL70. So these tests are only advised if you are suspecting that particular rheumatic disease. Otherwise, the rheumatoid factor, anti-nuclear antibody, anti-CCP, these are the three tests you should advise in all your patients. The other important test is the pulmonary function test, which should be done in all patients. Very few of the patients who present very late, they may not be able to do pulmonary function test, but most of the patients who present early and they come to you, you should order a complete pulmonary function test, which I said earlier: spirometry, volume and capacities and diffusion. You must take a resting and an ambulatory pulse oximetry. That means you should do a 6-minute walk test in these patients. Should be done virtually in all patients who present to you with any ILD, particularly in IPF, of course, you should do it. PFT will demonstrate a restrictive pattern. There will be reduced forced vital capacity, but normal ratio of the FEV1 and FVC. A reduced total lung capacity, a reduced diffusion DLCO, and as the disease progresses, there is a decrease in the 6-minute walk distance. So these will tell you that how severe is your patient, and it will support the diagnosis what you are thinking in your patient. Now the chest imaging, of course, the most common finding of IPF is an increase in the reticular mocking. Although this is a non-specific finding, could be seen in all other interstitial lung disease or heart failure, but in this you find they are more of a peripheral and basilar. But this gives you, the chest X-ray gives you an idea that probably your patient could be interstitial lung disease. But I think it is essential in these patients to get a HRCT or a high resolution computerized tomography of the chest. Peripheral bibasilar reticular opacities associated with architectural distortion, honeycombing and traction bronchiectasis. These are the lesions which are seen on HRCT. Honeycombing refers to a cluster of cystic air spaces about 3 to 10 millimeter in diameter, usually in the subpleural location or the basilar location. While honeycombing is essential to make a diagnosis of IPF, but in certain cases this may be absent as well. As you can see on this, there is an involvement of the periphery, peripheral reticular shadows with architectural distortion. And in this you see there is a traction bronchiectasis and there is some amount of honeycombing seen in this patient. The UIP pattern is said when all features are present, like you have the subpleural, basal predominant, reticular abnormalities with the honeycombing with or without traction bronchiectasis, and absence of feature listed as inconsistent in UIP pattern. When all four are present, you don't require anything to make a diagnosis of UIP or IPF. The possible UIP is when the person has a subpleural basal predominance, reticular abnormalities, but there is no honeycombing or traction bronchiectasis, and absence of feature listed as inconsistent with UIP pattern. Now, what are these inconsistent? Like you have the upper or mid lung. IPF is a lower lung disease. So, if you get an upper and mid lung, probably it is not IPF. Peribronchovascular, you find more in sarcoid-like disease. So, if you see that, it is not IPF. Extensive ground glassing. You know, in the IPF, you have more or less absence of ground glassing. But if you, mild ground glassing could be seen. If you see extensive ground glassing, then it is not, it could be any other disease like the heart failure or desquamated interstitial pneumonia. Profuse micronodules, discrete cyst, diffuse mosaic attention, ear trapping, consolidation in bronchopulmonary segments. So, these are, if you see, these are seen in other interstitial lung disease. So, if you see them, they are inconsistent with IPF, and any of the 7 features if you see, probably you are not dealing with the IPF. The other feature is that pleural disease is very uncommon in IPF. So, if you find a pleural disease or a pleural effusion, you think of a possibility of a alternate or comorbid diagnosis such as rheumatoid arthritis, systemic lupus erythematosus, asbestosis, heart failure, drug-induced lung disease or lymphangitic carcinomatosis. Nodular pleural abnormalities affecting the upper lungs may be caused by the idiopathic pleuropulmonary fibroelastosis. So, if you find a pleural disease, probably don't think that it is a IPF. Then the other test is bronchoscopy and lavage. The lavage has a limited role. If you do a bronchoscopy in a patient of IPF, it has a limited role, which I am going to discuss. A small portion, less than 10% of patients with HRCT suggestive of IPF may have a ball which is suggestive of an alternate diagnosis, such as if you find a lymphocytosis and it is more than 40%, there could be a possibility of a hypersensitivity pneumonitis. And if you look for in this CT and you find centrilobular nodules, you should think of that disease. So, BAL is a limited role and it is not diagnostic and it doesn't help, or it has only role in ruling out any other disease, like if you are thinking of some infections, is an immunocompromised host in those situations. But to make a diagnosis of IPF or in a diagnosed case of IPF, the BAL has no role. The lung biopsy, when the result of clinical evaluation, laboratory testing and HRCT do not allow you to make a final diagnosis or confident diagnosis, then you require the lung biopsy. And you need to make a decision regarding what is the risk in that patient to make a diagnosis, because most of these patients may present late and subjecting them to surgical lung biopsy could be disastrous. So, you have to weigh the benefit versus the risk in your patient. Feature that suggests the lung biopsy should be done if your patient has presented less than 50 years, atypical HRCT finding and rapidly progressive pulmonary impairment, because more or less many of these patients initially have a gradual progress of the disease. If it is a fast progressing and it's less than 50, atypical HRCT, you should do a lung biopsy. In patient with a severe physiological abnormality, substantial comorbidity, the risk of surgical biopsy may outweigh the benefit of establishing a secure diagnosis of IPF. So, patients who require a histological confirmation of a surgical biopsy is preferred over transbronchial lung biopsy. In transbronchial lung biopsy, you get a few millimeter size, it doesn't help you, and rather many times you get confused with the diagnosis, whether it is IPF or it is something else. The transbronchial biopsy would be useful if you are not thinking of IPF, if you are thinking of such disease like the sarcoidosis, you are thinking of lymphatic carcinomatosis, you are thinking of bronchoalveolar carcinoma. In those it could be useful, but not in patients of IPF. So, surgical lung biopsy via a video assisted thoracoscopic approach or thoracotomy, depending on the expertise. But good thing for the bronchoscopist is that in the recent past, the cryo transbronchial lung biopsy is emerging as a tool to make a diagnosis of IPF or any other interstitial lung disease. The only problem is the learning curve is little longer, and the bleeding, which is one of the complication of cryo biopsy, has to be taken in account. But I think the cryo biopsy, as the experience is more, this is going to be the test which probably we would be doing instead of doing a surgical lung biopsy. So, what do you see on surgical lung biopsy? If you see a UIP pattern, the UIP pattern is that heterogeneous appearance with alternating area of normal lung, of interstitial inflammation, fibroblastic foci and honeycomb change. So, if you see a normal lung, an area where there is an interstitial inflammation, fibroblastic foci and honeycomb change, this is one of the lesions seen in IPF. Then the location is peripheral subpleural, is most severely affected. The presence of fibroblast foci, which are areas of active proliferation characterized by cluster of fibroblast and myofibroblast that lie in the continuity with the established fibrosis, are the hallmark of making a diagnosis of IPF. As you can see in this, there are area of normal lung and area of fibrosis, and you can see in the same in this slide, and this shows you the honeycombing. And this is, if you see in a high microscopic view, then you see this area of a fibroblast foci in this slide. Clinical condition associated with usual interstitial pneumonia pattern, in addition to the idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, could be collagen vascular disorders, drug toxicity, chronic hypersensitivity pneumonitis, asbestosis, familial idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis and Hermansky-Pudlak syndrome. Then what kind of histological pattern is a UIP pattern? When you see the evidence of marked fibrosis, architectural distortion, honeycombing in a predominantly paraseptal and subpleural region, presence of patchy involvement of lung parenchyma by fibrosis, presence of fibroblast foci and absence of features against a diagnosis of UIP, suggesting an alternate diagnosis. And probable UIP pattern is when you see evidence of marked fibrosis, architectural distortion and honeycombing, there is absence of either a patchy involvement or fibroblastic foci. So, in this probable, you either don't see fibroblast or you don't see patchy. And the other features, absence of feature against a diagnosis UIP, suggesting an alternate diagnosis is present, or in these patients, if honeycomb changes only are present, then also you say it is a probable UIP. Possible UIP pattern is when patchy or diffuse involvement of lung parenchyma by fibrosis with or without interstitial inflammation. There is absence of other criteria of UIP, and of course there is absence of feature against a diagnosis of UIP, suggesting an alternate diagnosis. Then what is not a UIP pattern? If you see a hyaline membranes, you see organizing pneumonia, you see granuloma, you see marked interstitial inflammatory cell infiltrate away from the honeycombing, predominant airway center changes, other feature which suggests an alternate diagnosis. So if you find any of the other things, then probably it is not a UIP pattern. If I have to compare all four of them, in the UIP you have all the four feature evidence of fibrosis with architectural distortion plus minus honeycombing in a predominantly subpleural and paraseptal distribution. There is evidence of patchy involvement of lung parenchyma by fibrosis, presence of fibroblast foci, absence of features against a diagnosis of UIP suggesting an alternate diagnosis. So this is a UIP pattern. Probable is when you have evidence of fibrosis, but the second or third, one of them may be absent, like either there is an absence of either patchy involvement or fibroblast foci, but not both. One of them will be present and the third remains the same. Or if a person has honeycombing, then also you think of a probable UIP. The possible UIP is when a person has a patchy or diffuse involvement of lung by fibrosis with or without interstitial inflammation, absence of all other criteria, absence of feature against a diagnosis of UIP. So then you think of a possible, because this patient had a patchy or diffuse involvement of lung parenchyma by fibrosis. So if there is a patchy involvement, there is a possibility this could be a possible UIP, and then you have to consider other diagnoses, and not a UIP pattern I have already listed. So how to combine an HRCT with the histopathology? As I said earlier, if the HRCT shows all the four criteria on the HRCT, then you don't require anything. It is a UIP pattern and you probably don't require surgical lung biopsy to make a diagnosis. But if you see any of the surgical lung biopsy, whether it's a UIP, it's a probable UIP on histology, possible UIP, you make a diagnosis IPF. So if it does not matter which kind of the histopathology is there, you're making a diagnosis UIP, so why should get a surgical lung biopsy when a patient has a characteristic UIP pattern? That's why in a HRCT, if you have all the four features, you don't subject these patients to surgical lung biopsy. Now, if a possible UIP on the HRCT, if you get a UIP pattern, absolutely no doubt that it is there. But even if you get a probable UIP in a patient who had a possible UIP on HRCT, you make a diagnosis of IPF. But if it is a possible UIP or a non-classified fibrosis on the surgical lung biopsy along with possible UIP, it is a probable patient may have. Then a patient who has an inconsistent with UIP, like he has any of the features which I listed. But if you get a UIP pattern on surgical biopsy, you still may not be sure because he had an inconsistent HRCT pattern. So, but you are getting a UIP, there is a possibility. You cannot say 100% the person has IPF. But if you have any others, there is a no, if you get a probable UIP, possible UIP, non-classical fibrosis, then it is not a UIP. What I am trying to say is, in an inconsistent feature of UIP on the HRCT, even if you get an UIP on the surgical lung biopsy, it's a probable. So it's a combination of HRCT and the surgical lung biopsy, you make a diagnosis. Like I said, UIP pattern on HRCT, you don't require surgical biopsy. If it's a possible and surgical lung biopsy so it shows a UIP and a probable UIP, you can make a diagnosis of IPF with certainty. Then what are the differential diagnoses? Non-specific interstitial pneumonia, rheumatic disease, drug and irradiation induced by UIP, asbestosis, chronic hypersensitivity pneumonitis, pulmonary Langerhans cell histiocytosis, combined pulmonary fibrosis and emphysema, and pleuropulmonary fibroelastosis. These are the conditions which will fall in the differential diagnosis of IPF. Non-specific interstitial pneumonia is a type of idiopathic pneumonia that is frequently in the differential diagnosis. It has a diffuse ground glassing on the HRCT. A reticular pattern and traction bronchiectasis may be seen in this, but honeycombing is generally absent in this, and diagnosis generally requires the histopathological confirmation by a lung biopsy, either by a thoracoscopic surgery or thoracotomy or a transbronchial cryobiopsy. Rheumatic disease, you see a UIP pattern of lung injury. NSIP is the most common injury pattern in patients with interstitial lung disease and rheumatic disease, including those with rheumatoid arthritis. Differentiating rheumatic disease associated ILD and IPF is largely based on identifying the clinical features of rheumatic disease, like whether a person has a morning stiffness with joint pain as a predominant feature like in rheumatoid arthritis, or he has a Raynaud's phenomena, skin changes, sclerodactyly, increased thick skin, digital ulcers like in patients of scleroderma, or features suggestive of systemic lupus erythematosus. So that can help you to make a diagnosis of primary disease, and based on the radiological and surgical, you can make a diagnosis of the lung lesion. Then drug and irradiation induced UIP. It can be seen with cyclophosphamide, bleomycin, methotrexate, nitrofurantoin. So drug induced UIP also you need to keep in mind when you are dealing with this. Asbestosis is another condition where you can find a UIP pattern. It is the history which will tell you patient has been working in shipbuilding, welding, demolition. The HRCT pattern is similar to IPF, but pleural plaques, particularly the linear bands of calcification, are the clue to underlying asbestosis. Definitive diagnosis requires an occupational history and demonstration of asbestos fiber in the tissue specimen to say that it is a asbestosis. Then chronic hypersensitivity pneumonitis can also look like IPF. The typical HRCT appearance is that of a centrilobular nodules and lobular area of decreased perfusion on HRCT, although these features are not always present. And histologically, you will find the poorly formed granulomas or giant cell in the interstitium, even if rare, should raise the possibility of chronic hypersensitivity pneumonitis. The other condition is a combined pulmonary fibrosis and emphysema. Is most commonly seen in male smoker and is characterized by dyspnea, upper lobe emphysema and lower lobe fibrosis and abnormalities of gas exchange. Pleuropulmonary fibroelastosis is another condition which can be idiopathic or chemotherapy drug induced. Is a rare process that is characterized by upper lobe pleural and subpleural lung parenchymal fibrosis. The pattern of pleural thickening and upper lobe predominance should raise the suspicion of pleuropulmonary fibroelastosis. So if I have to make a diagnosis, suspected IPF, you first is from history and physical examination, identify causes of ILD. If they are there, then it is not an IPF. If they are not there, then you do a HRCT. Of course, after doing the chest X-ray, you do a HRCT. If you have a characteristic UIP pattern, you don't require anything else, just go ahead and treat these patients. Now, if it is a possible and inconsistent with the UIP, then these patients should be subjected to surgical lung biopsy. And based on the combination of HRCT and the surgical biopsy, you make a diagnosis of IPF, and you require in this multidisciplinary discussion to arrive at a diagnosis of idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. So to conclude, idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis is a idiopathic chronic fibrosing interstitial pneumonia with a histopathological or radiological pattern of usual interstitial pneumonia. On histological examination, the hallmark of diagnostic criteria for UIP is a heterogeneous appearance with alternate area of normal lung, interstitial inflammation, fibroblast foci and honeycomb change in a subpleural location. The onset of IPF is in a 6th to 7th decade, except among patients who have a family history of fibrosis. The disease may present early. Men appears to be affected more often than females, and the majority have a history of cigarette smoking. The patient commonly reports a gradual onset over several months of dyspnea on exertion and a non-productive cough. Fatigue, fever, myalgia and arthralgia are rarely reported. On physical examination, bibasilar crapulals are usually audible, but may be absent or may be present unilateral in some of the patients. High resolution computerized tomography should be obtained in all patients suspected of having IPF. The characteristic HRCT feature include peripheral bibasilar reticular opacity associated with architectural distortion, including honeycomb changes and traction bronchiectasis. Ground glass opacities are occasionally present but are less prominent than the reticular changes. Broncholar lavage has no role. Lung biopsy, the result of clinical evaluation, laboratory testing and HRCT are not consistent with the diagnosis of IPF. Only then lung biopsy is required. And always when you are thinking of lung biopsy, assess the benefits of having a definite diagnosis relative to the risk of the surgical procedure. A surgical biopsy via video assisted thoracoscopy or thoracotomy is preferred over the transbronchial lung biopsy. Cryotransbronchial lung biopsy is emerging and probably also requires more studies to become a common test to make a diagnosis of interstitial lung disease. Thank you very much.